Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. A feel-good Thursday for the Pittsburgh Penguins after back-to-back wins. Obviously, a big one last night over the Montreal Canadiens, who they're in a dogfight with for positioning in the Eastern Conference wildcard race. It's December. A lot of scoreboard watching coming over the last couple of weeks because of where the Penguins have fallen to at that point. So I'm sure there's a lot of scoreboard watching still, but a lot of games to go here, Horwat. Over 50 games left on the schedule for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Plenty of time, but you got to make sure that you take advantage of that time. We'll see if the Penguins can continue to do that on Saturday for Hockey Night in Canada against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But interesting report coming out yesterday from David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period saying Kyle Dubas looking for trade options to bolster both the bottom six and the third pairing. Now, that report, while being the most Captain Obvious thing that David Pagnotta could have absolutely said, it's not surprising in the least. It's something that does spark a little bit more conversation as to who is currently on the market and who could fit the Pittsburgh Penguins' needs. Now, there is a quick reminder here. The Penguins and the entire NHL go into a holiday roster freeze from December 19th to December 28th. So if a move is going to happen before pretty much the end of the calendar year, it's going to have to happen in the next couple of days. But if not, you might see something happen at the turn of the calendar, December 29th, maybe New Year's Eve, maybe New Year's Day, who knows? But there is a roster freeze, so there's going to be a little bit of a quiet down when it comes to trade talks around the entire NHL. I have three names here, Horwat. We're going to go through them. I want you to rank them after we're done, but let's go one by one. The first one that I looked at is from San Jose. You know, Kyle Dubas making a trade with San Jose earlier in the year. Obviously, a couple people know the player that came back in exchange for that one. But San Jose has another player that intrigues me a little bit. Bleacher Report Trade Targets has Anthony Duclair as a potential trade target, not just for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but in the entirety of the NHL. He has 11 points this season in 26 games, brings a lot of physicality to that bottom six, has historically shown a lot of speed at the NHL level, but I'm not exactly sure where he's at. I haven't watched a lot of him over the past two seasons, specifically because he only played 20 games in the regular season last year. He played 20 games in the playoffs, but he was coming off of an Achilles injury, which makes it very hard to think that he's going to be at the same speed that he always has been, but still a solid player that went out and put up 11 points in the playoffs last season in 20 games for the Florida Panthers.
I don't think I'm too enticed by Anthony Duclair anymore. I don't know what it is. It just hasn't, I guess it's just not, excuse me, my cup of tea for the Penguins. Just not ideal, I would say.
Okay.
I like the idea just because of a trade at all, just making the moves, forcing the hands of someone to do. Maybe adding Duclair also forces someone else in the lineup to do something more. Like maybe it's one of those things, but at the same time, I'm just this isn't one that I totally jive with, at least in my head.
I mean, when I look at him, it's a matter of what is the player that he is. Because if you look at what happened before the Achilles injury, the year before his Achilles injury, he scored 31 goals for the Florida Panthers. Comes off that Achilles injury, scores 9 points in the last 20 games of the season last year, still probably trying to recover, looked good in the playoffs last year, and has looked all right on a pretty bad San Jose Sharks team. They've been better as of late, but they were historically bad early in the season. So not sure what you're going to get with Anthony Duclair, but because of that, I think the price is driven down a little bit. Not to mention that he's on an expiring deal that's worth $3 million, which is a lot more manageable than a lot of the players that are going to be on the trade market this year.
Yeah. It's manageable, but has never jived. And you're right. I think I would absolutely ride the same thing that you did. It's which Anthony Duclair are you getting?
Mm-hmm.
And that's too much of a risk, I would say.
I think it is a bottom six edition. He brings a little bit of grit.
That's not terrible, yeah.
He brings a little bit of nastiness. I don't think he's going to be a top player or top six player, for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But to be a third liner, I mean, if you're hitching your wagon to Jesse Puljujarvi, who's coming off double hip surgery, a guy in Anthony Duclair who had an Achilles injury last year before the season, that's, it's a similar gamble. The price tag's probably a little bit more, though. The $3 million is probably more than anything that Puljujarvi is going to sign if he does indeed sign with Pittsburgh Penguins in the coming weeks. The second name I have here, another forward, this one a center. This one a little less manageable with the cap number at $4.8 million in the final year of his contract. Elias Lindholm of the Calgary Flames. He has 18 points, 7 goals, 11 assists in 29 games this season. Has 19-plus goals in each of the last 5 seasons, including a 42-goal campaign in 2021-22 for the Calgary Flames. to me, this is the Tampa move. Like, this is the move that, hey, we know who we want. We're going to pay a lot of money and a lot of assets to go get them. If you think you're close to being that Stanley Cup contender, Elias Lindholm's the guy you go get if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins. But is that where they're at right now? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure Kyle Dubas is quite sold on this team being one piece away. So I don't know if Elias Lindholm's really on his radar right now. But if you get to that feeling where, Rust and Raquel come back and they both look really good, Puljujarvi looks good, O'Connor fits really well back in that third line, and you're saying, okay, we're one piece away. We get Elias Lindholm as a third line center. You get to do the whole bump down Eller, move over Achari shtick. If you're one move away, Elias Lindholm's probably the guy you go to get, and you probably pay a little bit to get some of that money retained, especially because it's in the last year. And I'm not sure who you send back in the other end of things, but Elias Lindholm would be a tremendous addition for the Penguins if they're able to, one, fit it, and two, if it makes sense at some point in the season. Not at this moment, but I think it's a name to monitor.
I think that's a good one. I like that one a lot more. You're right. Sending a player back is difficult because most of the players on this Penguins roster have trade clauses. And almost always Canadian teams are on that just because Canada. So that would make moving a reasonable trade asset to the Calgary Flames a little tougher. But that's a great option, I think. I'd be with this one way more. Another thing, too, is you're right. At the moment, going off of what David Pagnotta said, which is looking to build out the third pairing in the bottom six, that's almost exactly what Kyle Dubas said to the media too. He said if the depth isn't working, that's on him. He needs to be one that goes out and finds what can work. And when it came to the third pairing, Kyle Dubas pretty much said he wants someone to take that opportunity and run with it. If not, he'll find someone. So yeah, it's pretty clear that these are the kind of things he's looking for right now. Elias Lindholm doesn't fit that mold yet, but again, like you said, that is a name to watch down the line if the depth wakes up and if that third pairing finds some anchors.
Now, again, that's a little bit of a dream scenario because Elias Lindholm is a top six center on most, if not all, teams in the National Hockey League. Getting him to be your third line center is, like I said, it's the Tampa Bay move. Going, seeing what you want, getting what you want, paying a king's ransom for it. Yeah. They did it for Tanner Jeannot last year. They've done it for Brandon Hagel. They did it for Barclay Goodrow at one point. They did it for Nick Paul at one point. It's the Tampa Bay move. If you think that you're in a position to go for it with the best player on the board, the player that fits best for you, and I think that's Elias Lindholm. So we're both in agreement that that's a future option. That's a name to monitor. But the last name on this list, somebody that I think we brought up before, a player that is not overstaying his welcome, but he's on a very, very congested blue line. That's Tony DeAngelo of the Carolina Hurricanes. The Athletic Trade Targets board has him up there. I would say he brings another offensive option to the Penguins blue line. Obviously, right now they have two pretty stellar offensive defensemen in Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang, but he brings that terrific puck moving and a great skater on the back end. He's a very, very manageable cap hit on the final year of his contract at $1.675 million. I believe it was actually only a 1-year contract. Double digit in goals and over 40 points in the last 3 full seasons he's played. And he has a little bit of nastiness to his game. Him and John Ludwig. I don't know where that came from. Him and John Ludwig make a pretty compelling third pairing there. Who is Victor Ludwig?
I don't know. I don't know. I gotta look it up. That's an interesting one. You're right. He definitely has that scoring ability. Real curious to know if the Penguins want or are aiming for another offensive defenseman, because I mean that's what Ty Smith is doing in the AHL right now. If they really needed that, option. This one's just interesting though, especially because this one fits the mold of almost the exact gauntlet that Dubas just threw down to the third pairing of, hey, like, I want someone to come in and run with this third pairing opportunity. If you guys can't do it, I'll find someone who can. Yeah. Tony DeAngelo, for better or worse, can do that.
Yeah.
So I don't, and we talked about it before. This is a player that you got to separate the on ice from the off ice and look at what he can do on the ice for the time being. And if he can help the team, he can help the team. We'll see what Kyle Dubas would think of that. I don't know if he necessarily fits because, again, we have those two offensive defenseman already? Are you looking for more of a shutdown? Excuse me, more of a shutdown third pairing guy? But I think I would say he lands in the middle of the conversation here. I think it does go Lindholm because everyone loves a good home run swing trade. D'Angelo and then Duclair of these three options that you read to me.
Yeah, fair enough. I would say Lindholm is, like I said, that's probably the dream scenario. I would say Anthony Duclair is probably the most realistic in my eyes. And I know he's third on your list. I really like taking a shot on Anthony Duclair, especially if you need some depth scoring, especially if you want to be harder to play against, which Anthony Duclair has been hard to play against his entire career. By the way, quick update. Victor Ludwig he handles full spectrum of loan products for Latham and Watkins in New York, New York. So sounds like he's a loan shark. So I don't know where I got that name from, but Victor, congratulations. You got to mention on the podcast.
Free promo. Way to go, bud.
Promo for a loan shark. That's what we do here, apparently. But Horwat, the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's only 2 games, but they've certainly gotten better results. Now, they didn't look great last night against the Montreal Canadiens, but they looked a little bit better against the Arizona Coyotes. So we'll see which team shows up on Saturday against the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that the Penguins have beaten in recent history. 3-2 win back on Thanksgiving weekend. So we'll see if they're able to repeat that against Toronto on Hockey Night in Canada. And they don't have to worry about John Tavares' 1,000th point. He took care of that earlier this week on Long Island. Some sweet, sweet revenge for Johnny T after getting booed there relentlessly since he left for Toronto. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Iceberg. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.